The brutal and ritualistic killing of a 15-month-old baby girl named Adediwura, which means crown turned to gold in Yoruba language, resulted in the hanging of a king known as the 43rd Alaaye of Efon Alaaye, Kábíyèsí Ọba Samuel Adediran Asusumasa Atewogboye II, and two of his subjects in the year 1949. Hello, and you are welcome to the Crimebone. On this channel, we post interesting, solved and unsolved crime cases weekly. If this is your kind of bone, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe so you get notified whenever we post. And with that said, this is the case of the first Yoruba king to be hanged. Efon Alaaye is a Yoruba populated town in the Ekiti state of southwestern Nigeria, with a population of upwards of 400,000 people as recent as 2022. It is part of Efon local government, one of Ekiti state's largest local governments. And at the time of this tragedy, there was no country called Nigeria. It was a protectorate of the British Empire under King George VI. Mr. Lloyd Crow represented the British Crown at this time. On a Monday morning that began like any other, the 10th of January 1949, something horrific was brewing. An event so heinous that it shook the helpless community to its core. Mr. Ojo, the father of 15-month-old Adediwura, and his loving wife got up that morning and started doing the regular house chores within their home and in their surroundings. It was a safe environment, so there was no immediate reason for them to fear leaving the curious little girl to play within the space of the compound. A short time later, someone realized the small child who was playing within the compound was no longer there. It was though she had simply vanished. The parents must have wondered what kind of a bad prank this was, but it wasn't a joke. They began to search for her within the compound and its surroundings, but slowly it dawned on them Adediwura was nowhere to be found. The mother was already on the verge of insanity at this point. As the sun rose higher in the sky and the day progressed into the afternoon, the frantic woman went completely insane. She couldn't take it any longer. The commotion began to attract their neighbors, and soon a crowd began to form. In a sad state of delirium, the tearful mother ran out of the shade into the sun yelling, "My child, my Adediwura is lost." Confused and worried, her husband and other concerned members of the compound and family swiftly decided to form a small group, held a quick meeting, and all agreed the next step was to approach their beloved king, the Alaaye of Efon Alaaye. After all, the king is father over all. Surely, with his help, Adediwura will be found, they thought. The crowd of people arrived at the palace shortly with the parents of the missing baby. They were all stopped by the king's guards. But after they narrated the reasons for their presence at the palace, the king's guards granted them passage into the king's courtyard to wait. They watched the king approach them from the inner chambers with his ancestor's crown perched on his head. After the greetings, the father of the baby proceeded to outline what happened at his home to the king, who listened intently to the events of the horrific tragedy unfolding before his very throne. Eventually, the king spoke in a concerned tone, telling them to go home and he will see to it that the situation is swiftly investigated, and he is positive that Adediwura will be found. After several hours, The king organized a search party to find the missing child, but the effort was completely useless. They searched every inch of the town, summoned villagers and police to aid the search, but nothing resembling the whereabouts of the child was discovered. That night, Mr. Ojo and his wife could not bring themselves to sleep. The child's mother called out her name into the void of the night, Adediwura. Their crown of gold is out there somewhere. Sometimes I wonder, they must have thought what they could have done differently to avoid the misfortune that fell on them that day. As time went by, the case of missing Adediwura began to gain momentum, which forced the colonial representatives and the police to seek the assistance of the Central Investigations Department in Lagos, known as the CID. On the 10th February 1949, a team of police detectives from Lagos, Chief Inspector Arua, Sergeant Sule Agbabiaka, Olawaye, and Police Constable Ariyo arrived at Efon Alaaye. They commenced work without wasting time, and within 48 hours, they were able to establish that the baby Adediwura may have fallen victim to the antics of ritual murderers. Using commendable detective skills, 3 suspects linked to the murder were apprehended shortly after the detectives arrived. Enoch Falaye, Gabriel Olabirinjo, and Daniel Ojo were their names. Falaye was the witch doctor and herbalist of the king's palace. Surprisingly, after hearing of the arrest of the accused, the king sent an order for the release of the witch doctor, stating he was his only personal doctor and consultant and should be set free immediately. Suffice to say, it fell on deaf ears because as investigations progressed, it was revealed that the witch doctor kidnapped the girl while she was playing. During interrogation, the police were shocked to find out the details of the event that led to the disappearance of the baby from her compound. You may recall that the girl was playing in the compound while her parents were busy with the housework. The witch doctor, who must have been stalking them for quite some time, took the opportunity and quickly grabbed the girl. He had to be surveilling the compound to know when to strike, and strike he did. He hid the tiny child beneath his flowing traditional attire called agbada and whisked her away to his house. He then instructed his wife to carry the child on her back to the home of his servant Gabriel Olabirinjo late at night to avoid being detected. At the palace of the Alaaye of Efon the next night, the girl was smuggled in and they hid the girl beneath the palace stairwell. The witch doctor went off to call the king. The king arrived and noticed the girl stashed under the palace stairwell. He then instructed the witch doctor to treat her as he promised. And with a wave of the king's hand, the baby was butchered right in the presence of the king. Following the grisly knife attacks, the king brought out kola nuts and made everyone present to swear to secrecy. According to the worthless covenant they had, anyone who leaked the secret was doomed. The corpse was then mutilated and dismembered, her eyes gouged out of their sockets and placed in a container carried by the first person. Her tongue was then severed and placed in another container held by the second person. Both individuals then carried these body parts through the door that led to the king's living quarters. The following night, the king simply inquired whether the girl's corpse has been cleared. They took what remained of the girl's lifeless body to the forest around Christian Mission Society, CMS, a church, and buried it after completing this phase of their criminal operation. What could be more morally corrupt than a leader betraying his own people? As this new information which was meant to forever remain in darkness, came to light. The case took a new turn, thanks to the witch doctor's servant, Gabriel Olabirinjo, who, regardless of the oath, decided to leak everything and damn the consequences of the oath. His confession nailed the royal coffin while mentioning the king's name as the mastermind behind the entire violent crime. Kábíyèsí Ọba Samuel Adédìran Asusumasa Atewogboye II, the king and the ruler of Efon Alaaye, was arrested immediately. On Valentine's Day, February 14, 1949, the Daily Times newspaper blew its trumpet as it reported the criminal case nationwide. The people of the British Protectorate recoiled in horror and shock at such brutality. Therefore, coroner's inquest into the murder began in early April at the Obokubushi Hall in Ilesha, presided over by Magistrate W.O. Egbuna. The justice system under the British Protectorate was incredibly efficient, and no one was above the law, not even the king, the god's second in command. The case was transferred to Akure High Court, and thus the stage was set for the decade's biggest trial. The trial judge was Justice N.S. Pollard, and there were 21 witnesses. Aina Ola was one of them, and she wasted no time in revealing that Enoch Falaye, the witch doctor, had grabbed Adediwura and stuffed her under his agbada. To make matters worse for Enoch Falaye, the ritualist posing as a herbalist and native doctor, his own wife, Owomobi, provided additional evidence saying the child was kept in their house and she was forced to carry the child on her back to the residence of the second accused, Gabriel Olabirinjo, under the cover of darkness. In testimony that added more nails to the royal casket, Ojo Olofa testified that the child was taken to the palace the next day and murdered with a brutal cut in the presence of the king. After all the witnesses testified, the Crown Counsel, Mr. Crow, argued that the statements of the three main witnesses, Ainaola, Owomobi, and Ojo Olofa, were more than enough to convict Falaye, the witch doctor, and the king. Also, the Crown Counsel argued that the evidence clearly showed that the Kábíyèsí Ọba Adédìran not only had the intent to kill, but also participated in the ritual murder of the baby Adediwura. He then directed the court's attention to the testimony of Ojo Olofa and Owomobi. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, the king's lawyer, retaliated. He contended that the king had aided the parents of the deceased by organizing a search party. That, according to Awolowo, was enough to clean the royal robe of all blood. He didn't stop there, saying that as a king, it was possible that some of the king's enemies wanted to deal with him by involving him in the crime. However, to Awolowo's dismay, Justice Pollard did not agree with him. The judge dismissed the claim that some town enemy vowed to implicate the king in the murder as a spurious afterthought. In short, he dropped the bomb by sentencing the king and all his cohorts to death. But that was not the end of the matter. The accused, under the advice of their lawyer, decided to disregard the judgment of Justice Pollard and march straight to the West African Court of Appeal, WACA, where they appealed the trial court's decision. They appeared before the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice John Verity, who presided alongside two other justices at WACA. After hearing their arguments, the court determined that while these findings were circumstantial, the statement of other accused persons, as well as those read to him by the police and confirmed by him, had already proven his guilt. The court specifically cited Gabriel Olabirinjo's statement to the Oba and read to him by Sergeant Agbabiaka, which the king did not deny. Kábíyèsí Ọba Samuel Adédìran Asusumasa Atewogboye II, the 43rd Alaaye of Efon Alaaye, his herbalist, and Gabriel Olabirinjo were all hanged upon his final pronouncement. But Daniel Ojo, the witch doctor's second servant, was fortunate in that he was acquitted due to a lack of substantial evidence against him. And that marked the end of this piece of history. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on another episode where we will get to pick another crime bone. Till then, stay safe.